Please put your hands together and welcome from Johns Hopkins University, Anne Lilly.
Good morning. It is so good to see all of you here today. So again, my name is Anne Lilly. I'm from the US, from Baltimore, Maryland. And it's such an honor and such a privilege to be here today to talk with you. I'll be talking today about our home visiting in the United States, where we've been, where we are now, and where we are trying to move as a field. Before I launch into my remarks, I just want to say a sincere thank you to the conference organizing committee for bringing me here to New Zealand. I've never been here before, so this is a great opportunity for me to just meet wonderful people, see a beautiful country. So thank you very much to the conference organizing committee. On a personal note, I have to say this is the most fun conference I have ever been to. As Brian said, I'm a researcher. Often our conferences are a snooze. But here I have learned so much, but we've also been singing happy birthday, we've been dancing, we've been me, we've been we. It has been so wonderful. So I applaud you on that. In addition to your timeliness, this has also just been a wonderful experience. And like Brian said, I really started my career as a teacher in South Africa, in a rural village. So today I still really am a teacher at heart. I have a hard time just speaking in front of groups of people. It's really much nicer to interact. So I really welcome your questions, your comments, even just your reactions. Because really I'll just be talking about work comparable to what you do, just in a different context. So I think it's probably best if we do questions and comments at the end, but I would just invite you to note those down as I go, and I hope that at the end we can really have a dialogue and talk about what's going on in the US. So with that, I will launch in. I can't advance the slides with my own computer. I'm learning. So basically, what we'll be talking about first is child development and children in the US. So I know yesterday we talked a lot about child development, but I kind of want to talk about how we think about it in the United States. Then I'll be talking about home visiting in the US, how our home visiting really developed and then has changed over time. And then I'll be talking about 4 efforts to enhance home visiting practice. These are efforts to, first of all, learn what home visiting is doing, and then also efforts to enhance what home visiting can do for families. So, thinking first about child development and what we know about it. So in 2000, which is crazy to say, that was almost 20 years ago now, the US government commissioned a group of child development experts to really outline what is important for child development. So as part of the report, it was called Neurons to Neighborhoods, these child development experts laid out the core concepts of child development. The first is that culture influences every aspect of human development. Culture is very important. Second, we've talked a lot about this at this conference. Human relationships are really the building blocks of healthy development. And then I think the third and fourth concepts here are very important. Child development is really a balance. It is a balance between vulnerability and protection, or resiliency. And this is a balance that we can shift. Even when children are facing vulnerabilities, there is an opportunity. There is an opportunity for us to foster protective influences and shift the balance for children. And thinking about this balance between vulnerability and protection, I like to use this image to sort of think about the environment in which a child develops. All the way on the left, you'll see really the sort of more macro characteristics. On the top left, household material well-being. And these are things we've talked about a lot. We talked about that this morning. Things like housing, food security, employment, other basic needs. On the bottom left, we see family social well-being. What is the relationship like between the mother and her partner? They may be married, they may not be married, but what is this relationship? What is the degree of social connectedness of this family? Are they really part of a community? Can they rely on people in their community? A key thing to consider also, especially in the US context with our history, is really inclusion or discrimination. Are families facing systemic racism in the services that they access? Are they actually included as full members of their community? And on the right, we really think about sort of more personal level characteristics. So the top right, we think about the parent and their well-being. So things like the parent's mental health, whether they are substance using, their stressors, and then also things like mindfulness and resiliency. What are their protective factors? And then at the bottom right, we think about that relationship between parent and child. Again, we've talked about a lot. But these are things like attachment and relationship security between parent and child. These are the types of activities that parents do with their children, whether that's playing or reading. And then also that parent's level of knowledge, knowledge of parenting, but also knowledge of child development and what that looks like. So continuing to think about this balance between vulnerability and protection. I think you all know the US is a prosperous country. Some of us do quite well. Some of us do not. There's huge income disparity in the United States, and unfortunately, a lot of children really face the brunt of that. So I just want to share some statistics about where children are in the United States today. About 60% of children in the US have at least one risk factor for poor health, social, or developmental outcomes. About half of children in the US live in a low-income household. And at age 2 in the US, we see really stark differences between children from low-income households and children from higher-income households in terms of their language development, their cognitive development, and also their attachment with them, between them and their parent. And I'm from the state of Maryland, so this last bullet, I'm just sharing some information about school readiness in the state where I'm from. So basically in the state of Maryland, only about half of children were deemed school ready when they entered kindergarten this school year that we just concluded. So I'm not trying to be dim, but I do want to be real. We face challenges in the United States. Our children face challenges. This is an opportunity for us, and we do see it as an opportunity. So in the United States, we have been talking more and more, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, about what we've been calling two-generation approaches. Have people heard this term, two-generation? A couple people. So it's funny because I feel like we get caught up in buzzwords, trends, blah, blah, blah. But two-gen approaches are really old. Home visiting is an excellent example of a two-generation approach. This is basically just the idea that if we want families to succeed, we cannot just serve the child. We need to really work together with the parent and child to enhance this relationship, to improve the environment of the child. Because just providing services to the child alone isn't enough. So in these two-generation approaches, they really target sort of 5 areas. You will not be surprised by any of these. Starting at the top left, they're thinking about social capital. What's the level of connectedness of this family, of this parent with the community? What is the level of the development of this child? Does the child need support to be ready for school, maybe in terms of language or literacy? And then these programs are often working with families on education. Does the parent want to go back to school? Does the parent want a new job? What can we do to help their economic safety? And then they also think about economic assets. So this is really basic needs: housing, transportation, things of that nature. And then last but certainly not least, these 2-gen approaches really think about health and well-being of both the parent and child. And we're saying this very holistically. So this is really mental health, physical health, health overall. So, spoiler alert, 2-generation approaches, that's home visiting, that's what I'm talking about. So, we come to home visiting in the United States. So this is sort of a timeline of our development of home visiting in the US. I don't want to belabor our history, but I do think it's important context to understand where we are now. So to just kind of launch into this, home visiting starts in the United States in the 1900s. This was really a charity movement. It tended to be women. I know you're surprised by that. So it was mostly ladies providing services to low-income immigrant families. They were volunteers. They were not paid. And they were doing this work mostly through their churches. And this movement was strong. But then, as we come through time in the United States, our government starts to provide more and more supports for low-income, at-risk families. Movements like the New Deal in the 1930s, our war on poverty in the 1960s, we see more and more government support for at-risk families. And so these sort of charity home visitors, they kind of fall by the wayside, and we move more towards social work, which becomes a more established profession in the 1960s, 1970s. And then what we start to see in the 1980s and 1990s are home visiting models. So clearly you use Family Start. In the US, we have multiple home visiting models. And each of these models has a curriculum, it has a staffing structure, intended duration, intended number of visits. All of this is wrapped up into the model. An important thing to know about our models in the US is that they come from different fields. These three here, parents as teachers, HIPPY, and early Head Start, these also they all come out of early childhood education. So they are very focused on literacy and early language and really making sure that children are school ready when they go to kindergarten. But we also have home visiting from child welfare with Healthy Families America. They are very much focused on preventing child abuse and child neglect. And then we also have nurse-family partnership. As you might imagine, very health-focused. Nurse-family partnership really focuses on healthy pregnancy and then moving toward the health of the mother and the health of the child as time passes. So these models really start to rise up in the 80s and 90s. They essentially brand themselves, and they have implementation arms, and they begin to spread across the US. Then we move to 2010. So 2010 is an important year. This is when the Affordable Care Act is passed. I know some of you may remember Barack Obama, who, I know, off the record, I miss him very much, but anyway. The Affordable Care Act passes in 2010. The Affordable Care Act is primarily about healthcare. It's primarily about health insurance for those who do not qualify for our existing health insurance program. But the Affordable Care Act also included what's here on the right. And this was national funding for home visiting. This was funding that would go to all states, all of our 50 states, our 5 territories, our 25 tribal organizations. It was called the Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Home Visiting Program. This is one of many acronyms I am going to throw at you today. I apologize in advance. I'm sorry. You know, it's alphabet soup. But MCV is very important. So MCV establishes home visiting, it establishes funding for home visiting at $1.5 billion. This was the largest national investment in home visiting in the United States to date. And it not only, it put money forth for programming to actually implement home visiting, but it also put money forth to learn about home visiting through evaluation, through quality improvement efforts. And I'll talk about that more later. But an important thing to think about with McV, with this legislation, is that it really, first of all, with this money, states had to implement what we call evidence-based models. And states, now these home visiting programs were being held to many outcomes. I talked earlier about how these models came from different places. Some come from health, some from early childhood education. With the passage of McV, much more funding is available. But at the same time, now all models are being held to a variety of outcomes, from preventing child abuse and neglect to promoting school readiness. So there are some pros and cons with this McV money. And then thinking about where we are with home visiting today. So at this point in the United States, home visiting supports about 300,000 families annually. So this is quite a network. And what this map shows, these are the United States. Basically what this shows in teal, this is every county that is implementing home visiting. So you see that home visiting really is spread across the US. And when we first started with the McV money about 10 years ago, there were 7 evidence-based models. And as of today, there are actually 20. So we have quite a few models, and only some of them represented here. But at this point, we do have 20 being implemented. And to think a little bit more about what home visiting looks like today in the United States, we have, like I said, a variety of models. Some are really focused on one outcome, maybe parent-child interaction. Some models are focused on a variety of outcomes related to family well-being. When we think about services delivered by these home visiting programs, all services are voluntary. And across models, they generally involve assessment, to see where families are, to see what families want to work on. There's normally some provision of education and support. There's often referral to other community organizations. And then there's often coordination between home visiting and these other community services. The models vary widely in the frequency of their visits. Some models really look for weekly visits, some bi-weekly, and some even just monthly visits. And then when we look at the duration of services, some models really are very concentrated. They maybe only work with a family for 3 months. Some are looking to work with a family for 2 years. And they also vary in the length of visits. Some are looking for an hour, some hour and a half. And the providers of home visiting vary. Some models use paraprofessionals, and some use professionals, for example, nurses in nurse-family partnership. And then when we think about recipients, the different models really target different types of families. Some are really hard, they're aiming to serve pregnant women. Some are open to any family that has young children under the age of 5. And the models really have different eligibility criteria. Like I said, some really want to target pregnant women. Some want to target just families generally that are of low income. So there's really a variety of models and targeted families. So I said earlier with McV, with this 2010 investment in home visiting, it was really investing in implementation, so in programming, but it was also interested in learning about home visiting. And that's what these 4 initiatives really represent, the McV learning agenda. And what I'll do now is talk through each of the 4 of these and describe them in more depth. But first, dropping another acronym. The Maternal and Infant Home Visiting Program Evaluation is my hope And this was a national home visiting evaluation across all models involving many sites, many parents. We'll talk about that in more depth. The second here is state-led evaluations. Basically every state. So the 50 states, the 5 territories, and also the tribal organizations that receive MCV money are obligated to do evaluation. The evaluation can be of varying types and depending on the level of interest in states, it can be aimed in different areas, but every state must do evaluation work. The third initiative that I'll talk about is HARC, the Home Visiting Applied Research Collaborative. This is really an effort to enrich home visiting research so that we can learn more, so that we can improve outcomes for families. And the fourth initiative is not really pure research. This is really a quality improvement initiative, HV COIN, the Home Visiting Collaborative Improvement and Innovation Network. It's the last acronym that I'll introduce, I promise. So I want to jump into My Hope, our national evaluation of home visiting. So here again is the United States, and this basically just represents the participants in the My Hope study. So this was a national evaluation of home visiting. It included 88 home visiting programs from 12 of our states. It included more than 4,200 families. This was a large study. It included 600 home visitors, 142 supervisors, and then actually 4 different home visiting models. How many people know what a randomized controlled trial is? Okay, I'm seeing some hands. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page here. So My Hope is a randomized controlled trial, which basically means that we use random assignment. Here I have this image of a coin flip. And in most randomized control trials, it's not actually a coin flip, but basically a family will be assigned to either home visiting or control by chance. None of the family's characteristics are used. They're really assigned by chance to either home visiting or control. And I just want to talk about this because this allows us to assume some things. When we do random assignment, it allows us to assume that the 2 groups will be pretty similar in their characteristics. And it also allows us to assume that any differences that we see between the 2 families can be attributed to home visiting. And the other thing I want to talk about with My Hope is how they analyze the data, which I know this is a little bit of a snooze, but it's actually important. They used intent to treat analysis. And this just means that when they analyze the data, everyone from the home visited group, everyone from the control group is included in analysis, regardless of how much home visiting they received. So I just want to make that point. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But this is the analytic strategy for My Hope. So we'll talk through a little bit about the home visitors that were involved in My Hope. So 3/4 of them had a bachelor's degree or higher, and half of them had less than 3 years of experience providing home visiting services. And then when we dig a little bit deeper, 20% or 1/5 had been in their current position for less than a year and had no prior experience with home visiting. We have a lot of turnover in our home visiting staff in the United States. So I think this is just an important point to make, that a lot of home visitors are new. They're new to the field. They're new to working with families. And then also just thinking about well-being and mental health of home visiting staff, about 15% of home visitors reported having symptoms of depression. And then when we think about the families served by home visiting, they are relatively young. Just over 1/3 are under 21. They tend to have lower levels of education. About 1/3 had no high school diploma. 40%, so about 2 in 5, have depression symptoms. The vast majority are receiving some form of public assistance. and 42% have their child's father living in the home. About 20% of the women involved in the study were actually married to the child's father. And then just over half of families are experiencing some form of food insecurity. So these are families facing challenges. One of the things that My Hope really tried to do was not just focus on outcomes. It really also looked at implementation of home visiting. So one of the key aspects of implementation is how staff are supported. So in this study, they looked at staff supports really in 3 areas. They think about this as training, supervision, and then also observation. So the first thing here is just about training. So in the surveys, home visitors reported that they received about 8 hours of training in a given month. And then in terms of supervision, they received individual supervision in 31 of 52 weeks of the year. So about 60% of weeks they received some kind of supervision. And then lastly, thinking about observation. So this is when a supervisor will actually accompany a home visitor on a visit. About a third of home visitors never had a visit observed. 23% had 1 visit observed, and then 44% had 2 or more visits observed. And then just thinking about how much home visiting families actually received. So I think this is an important point that on average, 1 in 6 families assigned to the home visiting group in this study never received a home visit. I think, so I see some funny looks. I don't know about home visiting in New Zealand. I'm learning about home visiting in New Zealand, but what I will say is in the US, oftentimes families that are referred to home visiting, they're hard to work with. They are facing many challenges, and they're not necessarily ready to engage in home visiting. So the same thing happened in this study. Many of the families that were assigned to home visiting never actually ended up receiving services. And then when we think about among those who received a home visit, how much home visiting did they actually get? So of those who received a visit, they were engaged in home visiting for about 8 months. And then overall, those families received, on average, 18 home visits. So those were implementation results. Thinking about how staff are supported, thinking about how much home visiting families receive. These results are really focused on outcomes. And these are a lot. So I'll kind of walk through these. I'm going to talk through 12 outcomes total. On this slide, these are outcomes where a positive effect would be an improvement for families. So these outcomes are the mother received education or training, the quality of the home environment, parental supportiveness, child health insurance, child health visits actually paid by Medicaid, which is our health insurance program for low-income families, and then receptive language skills. So what we would expect here is that if home visiting was having an impact on these outcomes, we would see the solid dots sitting on the right. You'll also see these open diamonds. The open diamonds represent results from prior studies and what we've learned in prior research. So what we see here is that actually on these 6 outcomes, for 4 of them, home visiting had a positive effect. And what we see here is that for 1 of them, quality of the home environment, home visiting had a statistically significant improvement for families. And then with these 6 outcomes, this is the opposite. For these outcomes, we would want to see things moving in the negative direction for there to be an improvement with families, because these are things like a new pregnancy after study entry, the frequency of minor physical assault. We would really want to see a decrease in these in order for things to be improving for families. And what we see with these 6 is that home visiting has a positive effect for 5 of them. And this is actually, it's statistically significant for 3. So for frequency of physical aggression, for child emergency department visits, and then also for behavior problems here at the bottom. So when we think about MyHope and this national evaluation, we need to consider the strengths, but also the limits of what we can say out of the study. So first, this was a large-scale study. It was national. It involved multiple models, and it really took an intense look at program implementation, how staff are supported, services provided to families, things of that nature. But it also has its limitations. It was not nationally representative. Most sites in MyHope were in metro areas. They were not necessarily the most rural sites. Also, sites in MyHope tended to be larger. We also faced some limitations in data sources in MyHope. Some of the measures really relied on government data, and there's just varying ways things are measured by government data. And it can be hard to access that information. As I mentioned before, one of the other limitations is that some families that were put into the home visited group never received home visiting. And then lastly, this MyHope study, it was conducted pretty early in McV. And a lot of research shows that it's sort of ideal to evaluate programs when they're well established, when staff are very comfortable with what they're doing, when they have good relationships in the community. That is really the ideal time to evaluate. So some suggest that MyHope was conducted maybe a little bit too early in the McV time period. But even with those limitations, we can still draw conclusions from the MyHope study. So what we see overall is that effects are small for home visiting, but home visiting improved outcomes for families. And for 4 of the 12 outcomes that I talked about, those outcomes were statistically significantly improved for families. And then when we think about these results, we need to just consider some things. So it could be that there's small impacts, but the impact may be really concentrated under or with families of greatest need. And then one of the things learned from the implementation work is that implementation of home visiting varies widely across the United States. There's a lot of different policy and practice and different programs. And MyHope really suggests specific ways that home visiting implementation could be improved. And one of the things that MyHope also suggests is that we should be looking at effects over a longer term. MyHope really focused on really more near-term outcomes. And then MyHope really is suggesting that we need further efforts to strengthen programs. And that's actually something that I'll continue to talk about through some of the other initiatives. So I want to turn to the second McV aspect to enhance home visiting practice by talking about state-led evaluations. Now, this is one of our states. Does anyone know which state this is? Oh my gosh, I heard it. It is New Jersey. Thank you. I love that. I didn't even need my question marks. She just knew. This is the state of New Jersey, the home of the boss, Bruce Springsteen, Frank Sinatra, Whitney Houston, many important people, Ice-T, Lauryn Hill. A lot of important people have come out of the state of New Jersey. I do a lot of work with the state of New Jersey, so I'm happy to talk about what I'm going to talk about because I love this work. So this is another study that we're doing, but it's really very practice-based, and this is a study of coaching, because basically what we saw from research coming out of education is that if we want to build skills for staff, training is not enough. This work from Joyce and Showers, it shows that when a training just has like explanations of theories, we don't see anything of that skill in practice. But it also showed that when training has skill modeling, we don't see that in practice. And it goes even further. Even if training includes skill practice in the training, this is not great. So what this work really suggests is that training alone is not the best way to build skills and to get staff to use skills in practice. So what Joyce and Showers show is that actually when you have coaching, when you have ongoing support after a training, that's when you really see skills being used over time. So like I said, this is work coming out of the education field. So what we've done in New Jersey is really take this and we're testing it in home visiting. And what we're doing, this whole project is surrounding motivational communication. Maybe you've heard of motivational interviewing. Skills, yes, I see some nodding. Skills like elicit, provide, elicit, using the ORs, things like that. So what this study does is we have a training on motivational communication skills. And then what we're doing is we're testing on top of training, if we add coaching, how does that impact practice? And this again is a randomized control trial, and we have several study questions. We really are interested in knowing how staff feel about coaching. Do they think it's feasible? Can it be incorporated into their work every day? What is the timing? Is this something that they can actually do? Does coaching improve home visitor practice with families? And then also from coaching, do we see an improvement in family satisfaction and family engagement? So to talk a little bit more about coaching, when I say coaching, coaching is not supervision. This is separate from supervision, and it's really a professional development strategy. It's goal-based, and it's really targeted towards specific skills. And another important aspect of coaching is recording work. Do any of you record home visits? Okay, so you're familiar with this idea. And I can see you all love recording home visits. That is the message that I am receiving. So, okay, maybe we can talk about that more later. But coaching really depends on recording. And we use recording because it allows both the home visitor and the supervisor to get a really objective perspective on what's happening in home visits, how people are communicating. So recording is really a key aspect of this coaching work. Oh, question. So we have a question from the front. What does recording mean? Is it just paperwork, or is it audio, or is it video? What we've used in New Jersey is actually audio. So people have audio recorders that they bring with them. Some places have also used video, but it's not just paperwork. This is very much it's a recording of some kind that you can play back, that you can listen to again. So the model, people are so astir about recording. I love it. Everyone is awake. This is wonderful. We can have a conversation about recording later, I promise. But just so you know what's going on in New Jersey. So the coaching model being used is Rush and Sheldon. If you're interested in learning more, this book is actually available on Amazon. Just throwing that out there. But the way they describe coaching has 5 key aspects. The first is joint planning. Joint planning is very important because you have a coach and you have someone being coached, and their relationship is very important. So it's really important that it's it's not the coach saying, we're working on this. The joint planning is very important. They make a joint decision about how they're going to move forward. Observation is important, as are action and practice. Oftentimes in a coaching session, they'll do some maybe role play. Maybe the coach will model some of the communication strategies for the person they're coaching. Coaching really relies on active reflection, and coaching also relies on feedback. This is respectful but honest feedback about how people are doing in their practice with families. And what I want to emphasize is this coaching in New Jersey is multi-level. We don't expect supervisors to know how to coach. We know that they may not know how to do that. So the way this model was built is that there is a master coach. This is someone from one of the local universities in New Jersey who provides supports to the supervisor, and then the supervisor in turn provides supports to the home visitor. And this is really a parallel process, and in both types of coaching, we see the 5 key characteristics of coaching. Like I said, this is very goal-oriented. So just taking the master coach supervisor coaching as an example, the supervisor first sets a goal for her work with home visitors. This could be something like using elicit, provide elicit more in her coaching sessions with home visitors. She records a coaching session with home visitors, and then this recording is reviewed with the master coach and supervisor. So they both get a sense for what's going on. What is this meeting like? How are people communicating? And then the master coach coaches the supervisor. This includes discussion of the supervisor's goal. It talks about how we're making progress on that goal, and then also strategies that could be used to improve progress toward the goal. And then our evaluation is not done yet. The coaching is still happening in New Jersey, back home. But I did want to share some of the perspectives from some coached home visitors, from some coached supervisors. This is one of our supervisors in her coaching session with the master coach. And I just want to read these. So from the coached home visitor perspective, sometimes during the visit, you're going along with the flow. Coaching makes you aware of the elements that you miss. And then the second home visitor quote here, I learned that there is room for improvement in my practice. I learned a great deal from the coaching and was able to put it into practice with families. And then from the coached supervisor perspective, I was able to learn more about myself. I've learned how to be a better mentor to my home visitors. And then the second supervisor quote, which I think is very profound, because this coaching really encourages reflection and personal development. This supervisor says, I learned that I don't always have to have the answers to everything. I can be more of a guide to my team and learn with them. I am too a work in progress. And through this journey of coaching, I've been able to be more mindful and self-aware of the way that I communicate and what I communicate with my staff. So we're still wrapping up the actual evaluation portion, but I did want to share with you sort of what staff perspectives are on this coaching intervention. And we can talk more about recording later. So I want to move to our third effort to enhance home visiting practice, and this is really through enhancing home visiting research. This is HARC. So HARC is a collaborative. It is a research collaborative. So it includes 15 of our models. It includes 240 researchers, and that includes hundreds of home visiting sites, some individual sites, and then also some state and local networks. And what HARC aims to do is really change how research is done. The traditional research approach And this isn't just true in home visiting. In a lot of social services research, the traditional approach is to really test average effects, long-term effects of the full model for all families. But we have an enduring problem in home visiting, which is that most research, it shows that home visiting has positive impacts for families, but oftentimes those impacts are small. So what HARC is trying to espouse is a new approach to research that really aims to learn what works best for whom. And HARC uses these, they call them the 4 hallmarks. So first is focusing on ingredients. So these are the specific things that home visitors do in visits. They also are very intent on working as partners. Earlier this morning, there was a lot of talk about co-design, and I think one of the reasons that traditional research often falls short is that it is not co-designed. HARC is really making an effort to engage many home visiting stakeholders in research, in identifying questions, identifying measures, to make sure that we're defining and measuring together. And then there's a focus on near-term outcomes. What are some things that we can measure that are going to happen quicker than things like school readiness? And then also testing efficiently. So using efficient research designs, so we're not overburdening families, so that we're measuring really only what we need to measure. So that is the HARC approach. And then I want to talk lastly about HV Coin. So this is an effort near and dear to my heart. I am basically half researcher, but also half coach. But the coaching I do is actually quality improvement coaching, and that's as part of HV Coin. So this is an effort that started in 2013, and it was really an effort to create a national quality improvement effort in home visiting. And at the start, it involved 13 programs from 8 states and from 1 tribal organization. And these 13 programs served about 1,200 children. And basically each program formed a CQI team, and then they focused on 4 outcomes. Well, each team focused on 1 outcome, but across the collaborative, they focused on breastfeeding, developmental health promotion, maternal depression, and family engagement. In HV Coin, they used the Breakthrough Series model for quality improvement, and this really depends on a theory of change, a specific aim. The team is the absolute foundation of the quality improvement work. I show here, this is one of the quality improvement teams from Indianapolis, from HV Coin 1.0, and the team is the foundation of the work. And with the CQI team, it's very important to engage many different people involved in home visiting, from maybe the program manager to the supervisor to frontline staff who know the work best. So CQI is really an effort to engage all people so that you can get a good perspective on the process of home visiting. And what HV Coin did was it asked each team to meet regularly, but then it also brought all 13 teams together. They would meet virtually to discuss how they're doing, the ideas that they're testing, how it's all going. And then, in addition to sharing their work, they were also collecting common measures so that they could compare how they were doing. And these cross-team meetings were really valuable because a team in Indianapolis could be learning from a team in New York. They could be exchanging ideas and learning from one another. And just looking at the outcomes of HV Coin, so like I said, they were focused in different outcome areas, but they did see improvements in breastfeeding initiation out of their work from baseline to follow-up. They saw improvements in children receiving timely developmental support, and they also saw improvements in depression symptoms and women actually receiving treatment for those symptoms. And I also just included here a quote from one HV Coin participant who said that the HV Coin experience has helped us to grow a culture of change at our site. Quality improvement has been really embedded in our day-to-day operations and is used anytime we see a need for improvement in our practice. So HV Coin has really changed the way some programs do their work. And then the current iteration of HV Coin is HV Coin 2.0. And this is the iteration in which I work. So this is really scale and spread. So I said in the first iteration, there were really only 13 programs. In this iteration, there are 40. So this is really an attempt to start to build more of a national network of quality improvement. And really, we're focused in two primary areas, developmental health promotion and maternal depression. And the collaborative really aims to build quality improvement expertise and capacity of CQI teams. And I'm part of the New Jersey State team, and I provide coaching, like I said, and we provide coaching in quality improvement methods, but also coaching in how to engage families and parents in quality improvement. Frontline staff are key partners in quality improvement, but so are families. Families experience programs every day, and they can provide really valuable information about how quality improvement should take place. So we provide supports in both of these areas in our coaching. And just to give you a sense for what coaching actually looks like, and this is yours truly, but basically what we do is we bring the teams together. And up in the top corner is Erica, who's a home visitor. And then second is Alicia from the state team, then myself. And then we see a home visiting supervisor as well. So in this quality improvement coaching, we really give staff the opportunity to reflect on the quality improvement work they've been doing, how it's going, how they want to move that work forward. So this is the last of our sort of initiatives to enhance home visiting practice. So I want to bring us back to where I started with these core concepts of child development. So most importantly, child development is this balance between vulnerability and protection. And children remain open. They remain malleable to protection and risk. And really, we have an opportunity. If we can use effective interventions, and if we can enhance the effectiveness of interventions, we can really shift that balance between risk and protection to get more positive outcomes for families. So I want to say a huge thank you to my mentors, to all my collaborators in the state of New Jersey, and also many thanks to you. I'm Kia ora, and I'm happy to talk about recording or any other questions you might have.
So as Anne said, yes, questions, and if you can just call it out, please. I'll bring them. I'm not running, but I am walking fast. Oh, and for our next ones over, just come out into the aisles. That'll be good, yes. Oh, no, I'll pass it over to you.
Kia ora, Anne. Thank you very much for the presentation. Evaluation is very close to my heart. I'm Jan Egan from the Early Start Project, and we did an original randomised control trial before Family Start began. So I'm curious to know, you talked about engaging families in quality improvement and how that's done at the home visiting level. I'd really like to know more about that.
Sure. So in thinking about engaging families in quality improvement, there are a lot of aspects to this. So first, there's the identification of parents who might be good members of a quality improvement team. And this is, and we ask home visitors to help with the identification of families because they know families best. They know families that are excited to contribute to the program. Maybe they already attend. If the program has like any group events, maybe they attend the group events of the program. So there's first the identification of eligible parents, and then inviting them in. And it's a little challenging because sometimes parents, they feel uncomfortable at the table. They don't really know what they're supposed to be doing, and they may just be intimidated. Many of the parents served by home visiting, in the US at least, they have not had good school experiences, and when they think about the idea of coming to a meeting, they're just uncomfortable. So part of the engagement of families is also just encouraging them and kind of coaching them and how to bring their ideas to the table, and maybe even having pre-meetings with them one-on-one, where you speak with them about, the meeting's going to be about this. Maybe you can, at home, think about, what do you think about that idea? Come to the meeting with your ideas in place so that you're ready to share. So there can also just be some supports, because some of the families supported by home visiting, they just don't have a lot of work experience, and the idea of participating in a meeting like that can be really overwhelming. So I think it's a lot of support. Yeah. Well, so she just asked if it's like a focus group. So that is certainly one form of family engagement. Bringing parents together and asking them directed questions about how they see services, how services could be improved, things like that. But with HV Coin, what we're actually trying to do is bring parents to be part of the CQI team, so that when a CQI or when a quality improvement idea is put forth, the parent can have a role in framing that idea. And like if a staff person has suggested a certain idea, the parent can give feedback on whether or not that makes sense. So they would be an active member of the CQI team. And really also, like, once the test has been run, really part of the team thinking through, should we continue this idea? Would this work for other families, or should we abandon this idea, adapt it, whatever the case may be. But they are an equal partner at the table. Yeah.
Sorry, I have two questions actually.
Love it.
My first question is regarding that recording thing that you talked about. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like 70% of my job is buried in paperwork and caseload. So if there is any way that you can recommend to minimize that, that'd be highly appreciated. And my second question is, what was the caseload ratio of all those services? And what is your recommended caseload recommendation that you think this is the number that we as social workers should have for effectiveness within working with our families?
Yeah. Awesome, sister. Very good. Very good.
So I feel like I've walked into something here. With your first question, with recording. So when I say recording, I really mean audio or video recording. So I know, and home visitors in the US talk about this all the time as well. There is so much paperwork, and it is very time consuming. And I don't know what your situation is here, but in the US, a lot of home visiting models, like in the home, they are writing things on paper, but then when they get back to the office, they have to enter all of it. So it's a tremendous amount of work. So when I just to be clear, when I say recording, I mean actual like audio or video recording. So there's some level of discomfort with recording for some families. They are not comfortable being recorded, which I understand. But the recording in and of itself isn't necessarily an additional time burden. If families are comfortable and are okay with it, the recording isn't necessarily an additional time thing. To your second question, in terms of caseloads, so like I said, we have 20 different models that are deemed evidence-based in the US. So, and they have different caseload requirements. on average, the caseloads are somewhere between 15 and 25 families for the different programs, which is quite a range. And I don't know if that helps or hurts.
Hi, Anne.
Hi.
My question is that I'm sure you work with a diverse range of families in terms of ethnicities. With respect to your coaching, I just want to ask, where does cultural competency fit in? How do you incorporate that with your coaching?
That is an excellent question. So it's actually really interesting you asked that. When I was looking at my slides this morning, I see that, I have these core concepts of development, and the first one is that culture matters. But then I don't actually talk about race, ethnicity, or culture really in my presentation at all, which is horrible. So apologies for that. And I appreciate your question. When we think about the coaching, it is very, very interesting. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the demographics of the United States, but in the US today, about a third of our population are Hispanic. They are people who are either descended from or they are immigrants from Central America, South America. So their home language is Spanish. And their culture differs from sort of white American culture. With the coaching, one thing that has been great about this model, especially the New Jersey model I'm talking about specifically, is that it is this multi-layered approach where the master coach supports the supervisor who supports the home visitor. In a lot of our home visiting programs, like I said, home visitors are paraprofessionals. They come from the community. So in a lot of communities where most moms are Hispanic, home visitors are Hispanic. So when we have this coaching process, the supervisor is often Hispanic as well. So she can help the home visitor sort of think through how to work, with a person's culture, and really think through how to work for positive child outcomes while respecting where families are coming from. And I think that's one of the pros of this coaching approach, actually, because since the supervisors are the ones who are directly coaching staff, they know the context. And also, very importantly, they speak Spanish. They understand what's going on much better than the master coach does, frankly. So I think this layered approach is actually a great way of being culturally competent, because our staff who are of the community are really being supported in developing this new skill set. So, hi. Oh.
Sorry.
So with the layered approach, is there any research around it going a step further from the social worker becoming a coach for the families that they're working with as well?
So having okay, I understand what you're saying. So that's an excellent point. And actually, when I was making these slides, sorry, we're going to go through a backwards tour. This is boring. With this, basically, you are correct. And I should have done this, but I just didn't have time. On the other side of this home visitor, there should also be a family. There should be a parent, because really what's happening through these layers in the coaching sessions, the master coach, the supervisor, they're modeling quality communication. They're modeling motivational communication techniques. And so the concept is really that this home visitor is going to start to use those skills more with her own families. So to your point, if this all works well, I think this home visitor really becomes a coach as well. And I think that's what you were asking. Good question. Oh, hello. Hi.
1, 2. Oh, okay. Kia ora, Anne.
Thank you.
I'm one of the few males that kia ora, kia kaha tāne mā, that are apparently involved with this national organisation. Anyway, I'm just interested about gender. I think here in Aotearoa there seems to be quite a, people want to have, women working with women, Māori working with Māori, and they're very vocal about that sometimes. So I'm just curious about, working with men. For example, I went into one of the first home visits I went into with a female co-worker. We met with Mum, we left the house. I said, "Where's Dad?" She said, "He's in the room next door."
Oh.
So I'm just curious to know how we're working and engaging with men.
Yeah. This is an excellent point. And in the United States, we're talking about this more and more because, we're trying to support families. Mothers are key parts of families, but so are fathers. So how do we support them together? And so first thinking about staffing in the U.S., the staffing is very similar to what we see here. The vast majority of home visitors in the U.S. are also female. But there is more and more care being put into thinking about fathers and how we support them in the work. And maybe that is an increased effort to recruit male home visitors. And to also incorporate fathers into home visits. Because like you're saying, maybe dad is home, but he's just not present. So I think there is an increased effort to bring fathers in. And I think it can just be, depending on someone's culture, that's maybe not a norm. So I think it's an attempt to be respectful, but also to see the fathers as key partners as well. So. Oh, hello.
Hello. I have a couple of questions. One is around fathers as well, because a lot of the mums that we work with, there's a lot of domestic violence in the home. So just wondering how in the US, how do they work with the father staying connected with the children when there's domestic violence involvement and safety issues? And then my second question is around confidentiality and the laws around that in the US. How does that go with the recording of sessions and stuff like that?
So, first on your father-related question with, domestic violence or like a safety concern, really. I think in home visiting in the U.S., the first priority is absolutely safety. Safety of the mother, safety of the child. So if there is a domestic violence situation, I think the top priority is getting the mother and child to be safe. And then I think subsequent to that, there would be an effort to engage dad. Then around the consent question. So this is a very important question. And we actually, especially in New Jersey, the home visiting programs that we work with, when families begin services, they often receive a consent form for really participating in evaluation generally. So they sign this consent for evaluation and that their data be used in evaluation really at the beginning of their work in home visiting. When it comes to the recordings, there's been a lot of talk about really expanding those program consent forms to explicitly state that we might want to record one of your home visits in order to improve our quality. Because we really see this home visiting recording as part of quality improvement and as part of professional development for staff. But the consent is very important, and it is something it's incorporated already into how the program operates and how the program works with a family. Hi.
Kia ora, Anne.
Thank you.
I firstly want to acknowledge you for acknowledging the pioneers of this movement, which is the women and the communities that you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, because I think it's very important part of this movement in this area of social work. I also like all the models that you talked about, that you the team over there is doing in United States. My question for you is closer to what the lady behind here asked. I want to know how many staffs are working that if with same ethnic groups, cultural.
So there's certainly an effort in the United States, as much as possible, to have a Hispanic mom supported by a Hispanic home visitor. That's not always possible, but that is certainly a priority. And it also becomes a little challenging because while some Hispanic families speak both Spanish and English, some really only speak Spanish. So if a program has a wait list, it may be that a family needs to wait to receive services in Spanish. But there is, every effort is made to have that match because it can help in the fostering of the relationship and in the family's engagement in the program over time. Hi.
Kia ora. Oh, kia ora.
Hi.
Ngā mihi. I'm just looking at the models of practice here. The only one I see missing is the whānau, as the family. And, what would we say family? Huge supports around there for the workers and everything around there. But, and I suppose from where I'm sitting, everything's there in place and that for the workers and for the supervisors in there. But nowhere in there does the whānau does the families have a voice. Now, if I was to go into a family with a recording machines and everything, straight away they would shut down. And there's a word that we use a lot when we go into whānau, and that's whanaungatanga. And it's really around kōrero, talking with the families and all that. And I could only imagine, America's a huge place. It's massive, it's multicultural. Mm-hmm. But and when I think around the families that we work with here in Aotearoa, it's really about the communication, firstly with the whānau. The whānau direct us. And yes, we have policies and procedures in place, but we're very much guided by the families, otherwise there's not going to be an outcome at all. So, but I just want to mihi to you around the mahi in America. But that's all I'm sitting here and I'm looking, and I don't see the family here, or there up at all. I don't see the family has a voice. And so that's all I was thinking regarding working here in Aotearoa is whanaungatanga and kōrero. But that's also, I just want to say that. Kia ora.
No, thank you. And I think that's definitely an oversight in this depiction. Because I definitely think that this would be it would continue to families. And actually, as I'm thinking about our coaching model, it's based in motivational communication and sort of this, using open-ended questions, active listening, these sorts of quality communication. So the effort really is to engage families better. But, I did not include them here. But thank you for saying that.
Okay, I think this will be our last question. Thank you.
Hi Anne, I was just wondering how well these models and initiatives have been working with the Indigenous people in America.
So that's a really interesting question. So like I said, the McV legislation, it opened up funds also for the 25 tribal organizations in the United States. And actually what's come about at the outset, they tried using some of the already established models with the tribal populations, but it didn't work very well. Surprise. The models were not really culturally appropriate, and they didn't speak to people. So actually, one of the models that is now evidence-based is family spirit. And that model is wonderful because it really was a co-design. The model developers really worked with tribal families to talk about the needs of the community, how families could be supported best, and also really just what terminology made sense, and really how to engage families well. So thank you for that question. So the model is really specifically called Family Voice, and you can learn more about that on the internet if you want. But.
Well, as we say a very big thank you to Anne Lilly from Johns Hopkins University in the States, a token of our appreciation, and a very big thank you for coming and sharing your vast knowledge with us, Anne. Thank you.